This episode of The Clear Out was recorded on the 5th of March 2024 at home in Wicklow. And it is a discussion of brotherhood, brothers, bro culture, bro spaces. And yeah, I am asking the question, is bro a dirty word? Has it become a dirty word? What's it all about? What's going on? Why are men talking in spaces, public spaces, on particular platforms? Why is it my sense that there are people who are extremely critical of those male voices and those male spaces? So I tried to get my head around that, and I tried to find a context to make sense of it, and I offer my own thoughts on what healthy, happy brotherhood looks like and what it is rooted in. So yeah, that's what's coming up. If that sounds like it might be your bag or might have some interest to you, please keep listening. I'll be waiting for you right around the corner. I'll see you then. Cheers.
Ooh, not gonna change my mind. Leaving the dream behind. Keep my moji inside.
Hi, my name is Dara Clear, and you're listening to The Clear Out. You're very welcome. I hope this finds you well. I hope this finds you coping. Maybe even thriving. How nice would that be? Are you thriving? Are you living your best life, as some people like to say? I just pulled a cat hair. I'm pretty sure it was a cat hair. I just pulled a cat hair out of my microphone. And now I'm wondering what the cats have been doing with my microphone. Have they been laying down some beats? Have they been plotting something dastardly, something gross, something disgusting, just to amuse themselves? Maybe cat butts have been rubbed all over my microphone. And then they're going, that fool is going to put his mouth to that microphone and our ass fur is really what's going to be coming down the line. Anyway, I hope that was just a random cat hair that floated through the ether of #blessed and implanted itself in the mic head. But perhaps not. Perhaps not. Anyway, the weather report quickly, because I know you care, I know you're curious. If you're a regular listener, you'll know the last 3 recording days was rain. And do you know what? If I'd recorded this morning, it would have been rain again. But I had some other things to do. And I am sitting here in sunshine. The sun is coming through the window. And I'm now no longer in the green room at #blessed. I'm now in the blue room. Because there's been that swap, that room swap. I think I mooted a few weeks ago. My daughter is now happily set up in the green room. It's her new bedroom. She loves it. And the blue room is the new study/home studio for now. But yeah, the sun's coming in. It's actually gorgeous. So that's nice. Who knows if it'll last. We're getting such crazy weather, such mixed up weather. Last Thursday, very cold, but very sunny. Had a great swim in Wicklow Harbour. Yeah, very, very cold. And then on Friday, which was Friday the 1st of March, we had snow. Beautiful, beautiful snow. And it didn't hang around, but I got my daughter out of school early. My brother picked her up and we went up into the hills where there was some real snow, and we had a great time. And I just thought this might be my daughter's only chance this year, this winter into spring. It might be her only window to have a bit of fun in a bit of proper snow. And we yeah, we took full advantage, and it was great. Really, really nice. I'm always utterly bewitched by the snow. I love it. I could sit watching falling snow endlessly. I feel it just instantly transports me into a zen state of just moving with the snowflakes. Or my energy just, synchronizes with the rhythm of the falling snow, and I just find it absolutely beguiling. I love it, and it's so peaceful and silent and calm and calming, and yeah, I just think it lends itself so well to ideas of letting go and acceptance and letting things fall away and drop off us, brushed off our shoulders, and allow us to be in that moment. And oh my goodness, it just put me in such a happy place. Last Friday morning, I was like, oh, this is just the best. So that was lovely. And then we had a load of rain yesterday, rain over the weekend, and rain yesterday. Buckets and buckets of rain. Pepper the dog, I pretty much kept her in all day. I was like, you're not going out in that, I'm sorry, because I'm not cleaning you. I kicked her out a few times to use the toilet, and she just walked back in and go, nah, I can hold it. So anyway, there you go. That's the recent meteorological ups and downs here. So what's going on? I just had the most delicious sourdough bread. My wife and I went up the road this morning to Roundwood. There's a cafe there, Roundwood Stores, and I took home a loaf of their sourdough bread, and oh my goodness, delicious. Hi, my name is Dara, and I like sourdough. I liked that sourdough. It was gorgeous. Just the crust, a perfect crust. A little bit crunchy, a little bit chewy. That slightly soury, burnt flavour. Oh, fantastic. Anyway, this isn't a food podcast. I'm having a cup of tea here as well. But if you are a new listener and you just so happen to have chosen this episode, which is episode 146, if my maths is correct, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. What I try to do here is basically explore different expressions of wellness and different coping strategies. And I always try to do it through a frame of thoughtfulness, of consideration, of honesty, of openness, of authenticity. And it's not always right in the dead center of wellness or well-being or mental health. Sometimes it's adjacent to that, or sometimes I'm bouncing off other things that have stimulated the discursive gene in my brain, in my being, and I just bounce it out here on the podcast. So anyway, you're very welcome. Delighted if you're a new listener, and maybe there are no new listeners. Maybe it's just the same 3 people who listen regularly. Thanks, you 3 people. I exaggerate. There's at least 5. So today I am interested in talking about and nudging into different areas of brotherhood, and what brotherhood might be, what it might represent, how I think of it, and maybe how it looks to the wider world. I'm not sure where this is going. I have a few reference points I want to bounce off, but I think my starting point is I have a growing sense, a growing kind of perception that bro, hey bro is becoming a dirty word. I just feel like I'm coming across different bits of commentary, different responses, different little opinions, even opinion pieces, articles, and I guess what it all amounts to is that there's a sort of a sense of bro culture, which I think in the in the world we're living in now, what that looks like is spaces, particularly online spaces, particularly perhaps podcast spaces. I think I've touched on this before, this particular aspect of this, where men have a platform, and men have a sort of a safe space to speak freely and to enjoy each other's company and to sort of revel in their bond, and often that can be very irreverent, and often that can be informed by a lot of humour. Humour is a very, in my experience, as a bro and as a man and as a friend of other men, humour is often a very, very central dynamic to inter-male discourse, particularly amongst friends. But what I'm getting is a sort of a critical lens put on those spaces and those platforms and those voices, where there's something very dismissive in the critique of these iterations of masculinity, these iterations of male bonding, I suppose, and male opinion exchange, or maybe even male echo chambers. It's and I don't know if this is just if it's something I'm interested in, because obviously I'm podcasting, I'm a male voice. As I've said before, I don't think my pitch is particularly bro-y. I'm not trying to appeal to any particular demographic. My feeling is, if people are interested in what I'm doing, it's people who are interested in thinking about their own sort of wellness program, their own wellness wiring, their own interiority, and perhaps I offer something resonant, and offer something that's open-ended, because I generally resist and don't trade in certitude. I distrust it, and I think the idea of absolutes and dogma, they're just weaponized. They're weaponized too reductively and unhelpfully, in my opinion. And we are living in at a time when public discourse and online discourse is really insubstantial and incredibly emotional and incredibly subjective, and not especially balanced, and it's incredibly combative and intolerant, and not that thoughtful at times. It can be very sort of flag waving, for want of a better phrase. This is my group, this is my tribe, this is my crew, and this is what we represent, and everyone else can, get stuffed. And maybe I think that is perhaps there's an implied criticism of the bro culture that I'm talking about, that it's that it has a bit of that going on as well. It's a bit of, well, we've closed the doors and we're safely locked in here, and we have everything we need, and we have everyone who we need, and that's good, and let's laugh and love each other intensely here, bro. And so I definitely sense that there's a critique that's quite mocking of those dynamics. Now, does this? Are you tapping into this? Is this something that you recognize or sense or feel? I think somebody like, and I did touch on this at some point last year in an episode, just very specifically in this area. I mean, someone perhaps like Joe Rogan really epitomizes this. Joe Rogan, if for some reason you don't know who he is one of the most popular podcasters in the world, a sometime martial artist, a stand-up comedian. I think it's like a cannabis advocate, and yeah, like a hugely influential, male voice. It's a voice that I've never particularly warmed to. It's a voice that I don't particularly trust, although I feel I have quite a few of my male friends rate him highly. But there's something about his mode that I find myself resisting, which is like it's, and maybe this is what I want to talk about today. It's a bit point scorey, it's a little bit alpha, and yeah, that's just it's not my thing, and it's not how I conceive of healthy brotherhood. So that's my kind of my opening pitch, and I suppose my initial response is I feel quite protective of the bros. I don't want to. I'm not here to sort of dismiss them or lambaste them or ridicule them or heap scorn upon them. And I definitely, I feel instinctively protective and maybe a little bit defensive when I see that word bro being used in this kind of arch mocking and dismissive way. And my instinct is that there's something here. There's something here about just the general, proliferation of opinion and the proliferation of platforms with which people can give their opinion constantly. And there are people who've become very successful in those spaces, and not just men. I mean, lots of different people, lots of different, age groups, different, whatever, whoever, like people representing different things, different voices, different tribes, if you want to use that word. And there's just an onslaught. If you want to expose yourself to it, there is no shortage. There is no shortage of opinion. There's no shortage of people saying what they think out there. And I guess there are people out there who like to wade into that and embrace a sort of a combative dynamic and really maybe enjoy sticking a sort of a provocative opinion out there or being very dismissive publicly of others. And maybe there's an aspect of, not maybe, I mean definitely there's an aspect of social media that revels in that and thrives on that and encourages that. Twitter, now X, is probably the prime example of that. I find I barely use Twitter. I have an account. I've stopped even mentioning that account for the podcast because I don't use it. I don't post on it. But I get notifications from Twitter, and it's almost always somebody having a go at something else or somebody else, it's almost always someone expressing anger or disgust or rage or being critical or dismissive of something else. And it's just bad energy. And I'm amazed at people who stay in that space and go, this is a great space to be, and I'm happy to get stuck into arguments with other users and to engage in this kind of opinion warfare, which I just think is it's contributing so little to the world. I don't think it's helpful at all. And yeah, I think it's a real, there's a real kind of distinct separation between people maybe like myself who are sort of very casual and reluctant users of social media, and then people who are much more higher profile than I am, which is no achievement whatsoever, who would use that space to to advocate or to self-promote, or it's one aspect of their brand or their business, and maybe that's a separate group, and maybe that's kind of very highly successful people or celebrities or whatever. And then there's people who really just are very happy to sort of to live part of their lives in those spaces, and I am deeply distrustful of that dynamic. I'm deeply distrustful of that relationship to social media spaces, online spaces, and how people present how people present themselves and represent themselves in online spaces, and their willingness to express extreme opinions, their willingness to be, so virulently argumentative and combative and confrontational. I just go, no thanks. But I think that is in the mix here. That is in the mix. That this is, this is a time when opinion and flow of information has never been more ubiquitous, prolific, more viral, and just it seems to just be accelerating exponentially, constantly. And if you go back to pre-internet or pre-social media, the sources of information were much fewer, and to an extent more trustworthy, more dependable. I know you have to qualify, using those words, because sources of information, if we're talking about news outlets in particular, magazines, whatever, they all have their own agenda, and that hasn't changed. But it was easier to shut. It was easier to sort of narrow down what you consumed, and it was easier to build a relationship and easier to evaluate the quality of information, and that is no longer the case, really. We can, if you're someone who has built some sort of relationship to this information flow, you can have a constant stream of information, news, opinion coming into your brain 24 hours a day, all year round, and for the rest of your life, if that's what you want. And one thing can bounce off another, and you can consume one thing and then get an opinion, and then get a counter opinion, and then get an opinion on the counter opinion, and so on until the next thing. And it's every day, every 2 or 3 days, there's another big thing that obsesses everyone momentarily. And of course, it's all contributing to reduced attention spans. It's all contributing to increased anxiety, accelerating stress, so many things that are just not good for us, that do not leave us calm, that do not leave us feeling sort of more in control, that do not feel us leaving, do not feel us do not leave us feeling, regulated, moderate, at ease in ourselves, because it's a constant aggravant. It's a constant poke. It's like just when you're about to relax your device, whatever it might be, it's like a finger comes out and just jabs you, in the side of the head, or in the ribs, or flicks your ear, or pokes you in the eye, or blows in your eye, so your eyes water. And you're just like, what the hell? Switch off, walk away. And I think in that context, then when people are already just sort of like revved up, riled, aggravated, and then they're like, oh, here we go. Here's another group of men, or here's another couple of guys with a podcast or a platform, and they're giving us their opinion on this, that, or the other, and they're just broing it up. And people are like, enough already. And look, I think, I was talking to a friend about this the other day. I think if we consider briefly the turn of the wheel historically, I think I can sit here now in 2024 and say with a reasonable amount of confidence that women are as close as ever to some form of relative equality, socially, culturally, financially, in the workplace. It's closer than it's ever been. And it certainly feels like, if I think about my wife, so say a Gen X woman, maybe Gen X women, they came up at a time as young women, maybe teenagers, young adult women, where the balances of power were still very much rooted in men's favour. And I'm not sure if that's the case anymore. Now, I might be naive saying that, but I think one of the consequences of this is, and I'm not saying this from a position of feeling victimized or vilified or attacked or besmirched. This is just an observation and a speculation. But I wonder if there's never been more outlets and tolerance of the expression of female anger. In the history of, well, certainly in modern history. Again, I'm not a historian, just like I'm not a doctor, but like I wonder if that's, one, do you agree with that? I mean, and I'd be the first to say, women have plenty of reasons to be angry, or women have had historically plenty of reasons to be angry, and I've no issue with the righteousness of that anger. And I feel like when I was a young man, there was, when I was a young man, I'd meet women who were very vocal in their criticism of men and their dismissiveness of men and their reductiveness of men. And, it was very angry, it was very vocal, and I'd always challenge them. Not because they were women. I just challenged them because I just said, I don't buy this. I don't believe it. It's kind of basically the all men are bastards line. And, as a young man, I'd go, well, if all men are that, then all women are bitches. That was my line. And I wasn't saying it to be provocative. I was trying to go, we can't do this. Like, you can't just go, all men are this, because then if that's true, then I'm just as entitled to go, all women are that. And I didn't believe either statement. But that, that anger was brewing. Since when? Oh well, since the start of time. But it does feel at the moment like a lot of that anger is just coming out in waves and waves and waves. And I try to look at it and go, well, yeah, maybe that's right. Maybe that's right that this has to come out, because anger does have to be released. And anger that doesn't find an expression can be so destructive. That that doesn't find I'm hesitating to say a healthy expression, but anger needs an outlet. Otherwise, it turns inwards and eats us from the inside out. So it's how you find a place to express that anger. And certainly, I'm sure, women, just like men, women find out this is a female only space. I'm with my female friends and we can just vent and let rip. And now we feel bonded, we feel better. It's a release. We move on. We go back to whatever we were doing before, or we resume. We resume the battle. And similarly, men have done versions of that. And what I would argue, like if we bring it back to the podcast thing, or the proliferation of platforms for the expression of opinions, is in the past those conversations happened privately. Those conversations happen behind closed doors, largely, and now people can just do that and put a microphone and a recording device on the table and go, hey, let's just call this a podcast. And maybe we can build an audience and build a platform and make money from this. So there's something, there's something about people kind of, there being no kind of check on what people can say and what, opinions people can express. And, it is what it is. I mean, free speech, and you don't have to listen to anything you don't want to listen to. And that's generally my mode. I just go, I don't need this. So, there's enough going on in my life that stresses me out and, presents crises to be negotiated or overcome or dealt with. I don't need to add to the aggravation by consuming stuff that isn't going to be good for me. But look, all of that is just trying to contextualize in quite a broad sense some of the dynamics that might be at play here. And what I said I wanted to talk about is bros. So let me just kind of lean into that a bit more now. So, okay, bro. I'm a brother. I've got 3 brothers. And geez, I'm going to just speak about the male thing, okay? I'm going to speak about the male thing, and that's just this is, not, I'm thinking of brotherhood away from female connection, away from female involvement. So this is very much about kind of male only spaces, male only zones, male only dynamics. So I'm one of 4 boys in my family, and without going into big details about my own dynamics and specific relationships, my brothers and I are not really that close. We don't have that kind of dynamic. We're not especially bonded. One of my brothers, who's living close to where we are, and is, you know, spending a lot of time, you know, caring for my parents at the moment. Like, he and I will see most of each other, and we get on very well, the vast majority of the time, and there's a good relationship there. We're very different. We're very different people, very different interests, just very different personality wise. But we come from the same, you know, the same background. Obviously, we're coming out of the same family. We've dealt with a lot of the same challenges, to euphemize the experiences of our childhood. So when I think of my older brother, my two younger brothers, myself, the dynamic there is not straightforward at all between the four of us. And, you know, there's my older brother's quite close in age to me, and then there's bigger gaps between myself and the younger brothers. And of course, those age gaps can play into, you know, less closeness, I suppose. And there's been, you know, just whatever, various things, like it's, you know, it's disposition, it's personality, it's life experiences, it's choices, it's all kinds of things. But the bottom line is, I don't think anyone would look at us and go, those guys are a picture of brotherhood, broiness. They're super bonded, connected. I would argue that is very much not the case. And, you know, there have been times in my life where that's painful, and, you know, that can still be painful, or that can be something that's definitely got sadness attached to it, regret. But it is what it is, and I try to be very accepting of that. And as long as there's not too much direct conflict, it's easy. I find it easy to be accepting of that, and then just take the little wins, take the good moments when they come, be grateful for the positive experiences. But there isn't a, no, you know, I was going to say there isn't a brotherhood in the way we might think of brotherhood conventionally, but in fact, maybe it's very reflective of brotherhood in the way, you know, a lot of sibling relationships can be very fraught. There can be a lot of, there can be a lot of tension and disconnect with sibling dynamics. And certainly other families of brothers that I know, it's rarely plain sailing. There's often a lot of rockiness. There's often fallings out. There's often clumsy, wrong-headed, battles, fights, wounds, injuries. I'm talking of, you know, an emotional kind. Although I guess sometimes there's fisticuffs as well. But the more sort of idealized version of brotherhood, or a healthier model of brotherhood, to me is connected to things that I really value, which is fundamentally, you know, safety and non-judgment. And for me, they are two, you know, absolutely essential ingredients to healthy male spaces and healthy male relationships. Because when there's safety and non-judgment, that's a space where men can relax. It's a space where love can happen between men. That, you know, fraternal love and comradeship. But if we remove safety and we remove non-judgment, that's very volatile then. It's very volatile. That is a dangerous space. That is a space where it's almost impossible to be vulnerable and almost impossible to be emotionally naked. And I know in my own, almost all of my male friendships, from when I was very young, those have been kind of key elements of the friendships, of the bond. And that continues to be the case in those friendships, where space is very easily given. Space, space to listen, space to express, space to fail, space to flail, space to be a real mess. And that's kind of what I think of when I think of brotherhood. It's, it like, that's where trust is built. And I think men crave that sense of safety with each other. And it's not always the case. I mean, because I think there can be another form of brotherhood that might involve codes of silence, and maybe other types of brotherhood that can be quite predatory, punitive, aggressive, and sort of maybe even exploitative. But then I think there's a bond that is covering up self-destructive behaviour and maybe self-hating behaviour, and iterations of masculinity that some men are drawn to because it's less scary to them than being vulnerable. Now, I'm sitting here saying this, I don't know if I'm being way too simplistic in how I'm speaking about this, and way too reductive. I hope not. But it's, it continues to be an area of interest to me, and my assumption is it will always be an area of interest to me. I'm never not interested in, I've said this a million times on the podcast. I'm never not interested in sort of the interior space, in anyone's interiority, like what they're doing to keep themselves on track, what they're negotiating in themselves. And I'm interested in that because that's how I understand my own journey a lot of the time. And I've spoken before about my belief that the more successful you can be in aligning or harmonizing the internal and external selves, the greater your chance for I'm hesitating to use the word happiness, but fulfillment, contentment, success. And when I say success, I just mean by sort of making oneself whole. That's a concept of success that resonates with me. So it's filling the space, it's filling the void, and that is not about pouring lots and lots and lots of different things into the space. Quite the opposite, I think. It's about simplifying and clarifying and nurturing core elements of oneself that one trusts, so you're solid. And from that solidity, from that stability, from that wholeness, moving in the world, and being present and being presented to the world in whatever space you find yourself, with whomever you find yourself, I think it makes you a much more formidable and resonant and powerful entity in the world. And I'm not using formidable in a combative sense or in a sense of dominating, but just something that is, unavoidably there and has to be reckoned with on some level. So I suppose what I'm talking about is substance. And my argument would be, in terms of discussing brotherhood, is that that substance can come from the validation of brothers, so to speak. So strong male bonds that are rooted in the idea of nurturing and supporting and validating and being unafraid to challenge one another in, I think in the larger interest of elevating everyone in the brotherhood. And if I use the definite article there and I go, the brotherhood, it suddenly starts to sound like it's a club. Are you in the brotherhood? And I'm instinctively not into clubs, actually. For someone who's done martial arts for many, many years, clubs, they are what they are. They're a necessary model to bring people together, connected to a common interest, and that's all fine. But clubs can get a bit. Clubs are always subject to personalities, codes of behavior. They can be subject to exclusivity. They can become elites. They can become all kinds of things. Cabals. And suddenly things can get a bit dark. But excuse me, my position is the brotherhood is open to everyone. The brotherhood shouldn't be a closed space, particularly if I'm advocating for that kind of brotherhood that I think is good for all men, which is a space that is, as I say, it's about safety, it's about non-judgment, it's about openness, it's about trust. And that idea of trust is really, maybe that needs to be explored a bit more, because I think the trust, it has, trust, I think, is integrally connected to the idea of faith. Trust is, I'll do this with you because I have faith that the outcome is not going to harm me. I trust that this is going. And last week I spoke about what is survivable, and I think trust is like, we can survive this, and I think that's a really important idea connected to trust. Is that it's not, if I talk about brotherhood in these terms, I'm not saying we all have to have the same opinion. We all have to believe in the same things. We all have to have the same political leanings or the same position on, on gender debates or on abortion or on, whatever it might be. That's not the thing. That's not interesting, is it? Like, that's just not interesting and not valuable. It's more the idea that the fundamental premise is this is a safe space, and we can disagree in this space, and we can butt up against each other with, conflicting ideologies. But at core, the position is one of respect, and the position is one of care. And the values that it's built upon are those. Because we might have different values in how we conceive of the world, or how we conceive of our family lives, or how we conceive of government or politics. But if it comes down to, let's reduce this, and this is just men spending time together, then the foundational system, I think, has to be rooted in that non-judgmental regard and that care. Because if we're trading in ideas where care is not present and where that respect is not present, naturally people are going to be defensive. Naturally people are going to distrust that love can be present in those dynamics and in that culture. And that's what I come back to, and that's what I value. And if I've been in, if I've been in positions to represent those ideas and represent those beliefs, whether that's been in classrooms, whether that's been in karate clubs, whether that's been in workshop spaces or performance spaces, I think I could be tested and pass the test of going, well, no, you've actually lived that way and walked that walk for a long time. And you've heard me say, if you're a regular listener, you've heard me say many times about, express my gratitude for the richness of my friendships and the richness of my male friendships in particular. And that's very much connected to what I'm talking about. So I think that is what I think of when I think of brotherhood. There's something in a channel that is open between me and my male friends, and certainly there are aspects of it that are definitely open to my brothers, my actual biological brothers as well. But it's I don't know. I think it is an interesting area to talk about, because ultimately I think if that definition of brotherhood is successful, you've got men out in the world who are much calmer and much more secure in themselves, and much more tolerant, and maybe more flexible, and less defensive, and more trusting. And how can that not be a good thing? How is that not better for everyone involved? How is that not better for the children in their lives, the women in their lives? How is that not better for their colleagues? How is that not better for their family members? How is that not better for their fellow citizens, the people in their communities, their towns, their villages? I don't know. Does that sound extraordinarily idealistic and naive? I mean, it's what I believe. It's what I value. It's what I care about. And the other reference point that kind of got me thinking about this was there's a movie out at the moment called The Iron Claw, which is directed by Sean Durkin and has Zac Efron in one of the main roles, and Holt McCallany as well, an actor you might know from Mindhunter, amongst other things. And is it Jeffrey Allen White, is that his name? The lead actor from The Bear. He's in it as well. A couple of other actors whose names I can't remember. But that movie is, it's based on a true story of a family of wrestlers, professional wrestlers from Texas, who were big in the wrestling scene in the 80s. But the family had a sequence of horrendous tragedies. And if you're planning to see the movie, I'll say no more than that because I don't want to spoil it for you. But what I took away from the film was its depiction of brotherly love and its depiction of the incredible bond and love and support and comradeship between brothers in very challenging circumstances, with a very challenging patriarch at the head of the family. And for a film that it's ultimately a very sort of tragic story and fascinating in how tragic it is. But I was struck by how gentle it was, and maybe that's testament to Zac Efron's central performance, because he, in many ways, is the conduit for the love that is palpably there in the story on the screen, and he holds it so well. But the film has stayed with me, and it was much more. I thought it was. My expectation was it was going to be much more manipulative and maybe a bit more kind of bombastic because of the setting of the story in the world of wrestling. But it was much more low key than that, I felt, and maybe all the richer for it. Much, I don't know if subtle. I was going to say much subtler. Maybe it wasn't that subtle, but it was just, I don't know. There was something about it. It's there's something really gentle, and I think that's a form of faith that maybe Sean Durkin had in the material, that he didn't have to lay it all out there explicitly, and take us on these highs and lows, but the film is just permeated by this fraternal love, this brotherly bond, and I just thought it was really beautiful. Really, really beautiful. And if I think of something like Band of Brothers, the Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks produced World War II series from 20 or more years ago. I mean, that's, you look at the name of the show, like that's all about kind of brotherhood, and it's very particular circumstances, the Second World War, the army, young men going to war, young men seeing the horrors of war, baptisms of fire and all of that. And I think that's largely a very successful show. But the brotherhood part of it, and not surprising because Spielberg's touch was there, was always a bit too sentimental for me. And so when I think of that series, the brotherhood part, the male bonding part, is not what I loved as much as other parts of it, because maybe it's just a touch sentimental. Another one I was thinking of is the film, I want to say Warrior, with Joel Edgerton and Tom Hardy as the traumatized brothers of a very destructive father, played by Nick Nolte. Great Nick Nolte performance in that film. That's probably about 10 years old now. Directed by Gavin O'Connor. I think that's a great movie, and that is a movie about male trauma and male damage, and the brutal playing out of fighting for love and fighting to find the love and the vulnerability. And it's literal. It's not metaphorical. And I think it's a very effective film. I mean, I spoke about this ages ago. I did an episode on the male chick flick, which is all about, men wrestling with their emotions and their inner lives and their trauma, and trying to find a way to connect and to express love and to receive love. So go back and find that episode to hear me talk about lots of different films of that ilk. But yeah, those movies come to mind. Another one I've spoken about in the past is Sometimes a Great Notion, which is based on a Ken Kesey novel, I think, about the loggers and a loggers strike somewhere in North America. And this is a film from, I don't know, late 70s, early 80s, and Paul Newman and Richard Jackal play brothers, and there's a kind of a tragic ending to that, involving one of them being pinned under a felled tree in a river, and the water's rising, and they can't stop themselves laughing at the ridiculousness and awfulness of the situation, but the laughter leads to a tragic influx of water that drowns the one who's pinned. It's very bittersweet and sad. But again, another iteration of Brotherhood. You think of the Godfather movies, and that's Brotherhood steeped in darkness and inescapable tragedy, and what Michael, played by Al Pacino, what he feels he has to do for the safety and preservation of the family and the business, and who he's willing to sacrifice, and how he bides his time before taking his revenge. It's merciless, and Michael, of course, he loses his humanity in what he does, and that's the dark side. I mean, and I know of families where these rifts happen, and there's no way back. That's how it feels. Now, you never know, never say never, but you see these rifts, and it's just, it's that trauma and that pain and that rage and that hurt, and it's just people kind of going, "You're dead to me." It's, I don't know. It's look, it's life, isn't it? But I think you just got to try your best. Try your best to be that element that remains open, that remains positive, and that is leaning into those ideas I've spoken about. Trust and faith. That there's a way to achieve safety, I suppose. And I don't know. I mean, God, it's a whole other discussion. I was gonna, I would say that idea of safety is, and I'm talking about emotional and physical safety, and maybe psychological safety. I think that's something that preoccupies a lot of men, because the male stereotype, the stereotypical path and gender path laid out for men can be so attritional and combative, and that's maybe in male nature as well. The male animal vying for resources, competing for mates, trying to assert one's status or alpha status, trying to make sure one isn't at the bottom of the food chain. I think that's really laid out often very explicitly for men. I'd like to think that that's changing. My sense is that it is changing, and boys today have more models of different iterations of masculinity that clearly present different ways forward. But my fundamental position doesn't change, which is that if we just keep it with men, just for the purposes of this episode, there's a little boy in all men who never really goes away. Like, there's a little boy who just wants love, wants validation, wants to belong, wants to be valued, and there's something very pure and innocent and maybe irreducible in there. And I think that essential innocence and purity resides in most men on some level, but it gets obscured, and it gets traumatized, and it gets battered, and it gets suppressed and deflected until there's no trace of it left. And then a lot of men may try to find the means for accessing that again through their relationships, through a loving romantic relationship. And then women are like, well, women will save men, and that dynamic that doesn't always work, does it? It doesn't work. Listen, we have to save ourselves. And listen, that's true for all of us. It's really hard to put it on other people. And I mean, I know, look, I always talk about the sort of the mean. I'm always talking about, I'm talking about largely representative people who are not at the extreme ends of the spectrum, because some people obviously do need help. But, ultimately, we have to save ourselves, and, hope there's still space outside of that to be appreciated and valued and loved, and not put it on someone else to be our savior. But men, definitely, I think in male spaces, like if you go back to the idea of broiness and bro culture, that's just men in safe spaces is what you're hearing, and sometimes it's just not that interesting. But I think you can be more forgiving if you think this is just a bunch of boys in a clubhouse with a secret code and a secret handshake, and they're like, I don't know, they're sticking their tongues out at girls through the window. Maybe it's as basic as that. So maybe don't be too harsh on the bros is what I'm saying. And again, let's just be discerning and go, maybe some of these broy spaces aren't as sinister and dangerous as others. Okay, look, that's it. That's all I've got for now. Inevitably there are probably points that I was clumsy in how I expressed them, and there's been probably points I could have made and didn't even occur to me. And a day after I record this, I'm like, oh shit, I should have said that. Anyway, listen, that's it. I'm gone. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this spoke to you. I hope it resonated on some level. I hope it was of interest. Maybe it amused you, diverted you, whatever. If you like what I do on this independent podcast, you can support it using the Patreon link, which will be there wherever you're listening to the podcast. That's patreon.com/theclearout. If you can't afford, a few dollars or a few euros a month for the podcast, don't worry about it. Hopefully someone else will jump in and do that. But you can still support me by spreading the love on social media, rating the show, reviewing the show, leaving a comment somewhere, throwing me a like, subscribing, sharing, all of that kind of thing. It all helps, and I really appreciate it, if that means anything to you. Okay, I will talk to you again next week. I'll be back with something else. I've no idea what. Have a lovely week. Stay safe. Be kind to the bros, and be kind to yourself, and mind yourselves as always. Okay, all the best. Take care. See you. Bye.